Well, good morning, everyone. I want to start off yesterday on Sunday looking at some satellite data here. What I often like to do is just kind of rock back and forth using the slider bar at the bottom to kind of find where the clouds are versus where the snow is. And you can see the snow clearly not moving here. We have a lot of snowpack right now across the lower 48, and we're adding to it down here in parts of the Mid-South over toward the Blue Ridge Mountains and Appalachian Mountains later today. There's also an ice storm to the south of this as well. We'll take a look at that in just a few moments here. But as I just rock back and forth, we saw a very cold weekend set up here as this Arctic air mass kind of rolled right along the spine of the Rockies. It did invade parts of the Pacific Northwest as well, but really just dove right here into the midsection of the country and is heading toward the southeast as we speak. But because the Great Lakes were relatively uncovered with ice, we can see some pretty stout lake effect snow bands here, especially this one that's that's shore parallel running across parts of Lake Erie. That was a big one that hit Buffalo over the weekend. Now, the other pieces that we really want to be paying attention to of that snowpack are these, okay? We know we're going to be adding more in the Mid-South today. We know that some of it's going to run up to the Appalachian Mountains. But what's the temperature pattern going to do after this? That's going to be a main thing to be discussing here in just a few moments. But I do want to show you in total what was received in the last 7 days through early this morning here in total precipitation. And the context behind this is kind of twofold. There was some significant drought relief issues going on here, and then continued flooding that rolled all the way up the East Coast. There's been, if you haven't seen this in the news, a lot of flooding throughout New England here, and strong onshore flow causing some problems. The Hudson River flooded, and we can just go right down the line looking at all of the incredibly heavy rainfall in this area. Now, one of the areas that has been absolutely key has been this heavy rainfall that came out of parts of Arkansas and got right here on the confluence of the Ohio and the Mississippi River. And the moisture that fell here and also on some of the headwaters of these two river systems was absolutely critical to the recovery of the Mississippi, which I'm excited to show you in just a few moments. Remember all the severe weather to the south last week and the regions that were missed, a lot of the upper Midwest and parts of the Canadian Prairie, the northern plains. And because we've yet to see the really strong subtropical jet return, we see much of the Southwest overall out of this flow as well. But I mentioned the Mississippi, and I want to give you the latest data because this is kind of nuts. When we talked on Friday, the river was 2 feet below low stage. As of early this morning on Monday, it is almost 12 feet above low stage. So that's nearly a 14-foot recovery in the span of about, 72 hours or so. Amazing to see that. So the question is, with all of that water coming through, what's it going to do overall? Well, we're likely looking at something like we saw a year ago, where we're going to continue to watch this go up, maybe getting up here in spring to the risk of flooding. So I would imagine that while this will probably oscillate, we're heading off in this direction as we go forward. The big difference between last year and this year is that the upper Midwest, last year, the upper Midwest, the Dakotas, over toward Minnesota, Wisconsin, that region was absolutely just blasted with snow. And that's not the case this year. We've not yet built up that huge snowpack, which is going to give us this spring flooding threat like we saw a year ago. But there's other ways to get that river to flood when you look at the southern half of it, and we'll show you more about that at the very end of my slides here today. Okay, here's the other thing I want to look at. This is the latest update on the root zone soil moisture. So this goes down 100 centimeters, or about 40 inches. And we've been watching this carefully, this area right in through here, and there has been some pretty remarkable improvement. And I think there's going to be a lot more improvement right into this area within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I'll show you why in just a moment here. But also, when you stare at this, you can see why we have such significant flooding problems up the East Coast, given that we're saturated all the way down to deep into the soil. From here, let's just have a closer look at some of that lake effect snow. I just wanted to show you this again. This is an 18-hour animation of the lake effect snow band that came off the tip of Lake Erie. And I'm sure a lot of you were, of course, watching the NFL this weekend, a really busy weekend, and they postponed the Bills game. Well, this lake effect snow band continues to target Buffalo. These are hyper-local, very narrow bands of very, very intense snow. And I didn't this morning go out and look at the most recent snow reports. I'll check in later today. I'll just go to weather.gov, click right here on the map, and you'll be able to get those snow reports. But a lot has already fallen. Now, going back over the weekend, we saw, of course, the blizzard that rolled through here, a multi-day blizzard. It was a ground blizzard that followed the main snowfall event through parts of Nebraska and Iowa, northern Illinois, Wisconsin, and then just heavy snows kind of rolling across this area. You can see the lake effect snow coming off the end of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Now, this was just the beginning of the current system that's pushing through parts of the Mid-South, but take note of how much additional snow fell in parts of the Cascades, some here in the Sierra Nevada, but a nice band of snow that rolled right in through this area, just adding to that winter snowpack, which is desperately needed. We'll take a look at the bigger picture in a few moments. Now, this particular website will update in about 4 hours from now. So all we've got is through 6 UTC or 6Z. So this is, we just roughly think of this as midnight, okay? So this is what fell in the 6 hours from 6 p.m. to midnight Central Time. And we've added quite a bit more here. So some places picking up 2, 3, 4 inches of snow. The liquid to snow ratios are probably more in the neighborhood of 15 to 1 than 10 to 1, just given how cold things are. We're going to continue to add snow here with a little bit of a little bit of ice to the south of that, which we'll examine as well. Now, I did want to bring up to speed on season-to-date snowfall totals. So this only goes through Sunday because, again, this will update about 9 o'clock this morning. And what we see here is now that significant portions of Nebraska and Iowa, Wisconsin are now in that 12-inch to 2-foot range on the totals. Where we are in deficit comparatively is to its north. It's kind of amazing to see where these storm tracks have sent all this heavy snow, avoiding this section of the Midwest, upper Midwest, northern plains, right in through here. Now, New England, we've had a couple of big events, but they've been melted off by the heavy rains that have come through. So remember, this isn't snow that's on the ground. This is just adding it all up when it did fall. We're well over 10 feet in the Cascades. In many places, the Sierra Nevada are still behind. And a way to see that is to go and look at the percent of normal. So I just take the previous years, add them up, and take the current year and take the difference and make it a percentage. And you can kind of now see what these numbers look like. So a year ago, where was all this? This was all way up here. And this year, the storm track is a bit farther to the south. Now, where this map is going to change quite a bit as the days roll on, it's going to be down here in parts of the Mid-South as we start to add in the snow that fell yesterday and the snow that's falling today right in through this region. I'm expecting some pretty heavy amounts here. But I want to take you back to the west because sometimes maps like this, don't really capture, I think, what I want them to. So we're going to go back to one of my favorite sites here, and this one's looking at snow water equivalent. But this is January 1st data. I did this for you last week, and I think it's important to do it again. So before these first 2 weeks of January, December was not a month that added a lot of snowpack in the west. But if you look up to where we are right now, let's just go to the 13th. We've made some pretty significant improvements, and there's more snow on the way for the western mountains. I'll show you that in a few moments as well. But before I get there again, I'm just building this story is kind of fun. Snow water equivalent. All right, take a close look at this. This is what would happen if you melted down all the snow. What do we have in it? And there's a widespread area in through this part of the Midwest, which we've been discussing as being very deficient in soil moisture, right? I mean, in fact, parts of Iowa are 20 to 40 inches off of normal precipitation totals when you add up the last 4 years. So we start to see all of this snow and then question, is it going to melt? Because if we got it to melt sometime in the middle of winter, we could get, we could get 1 inch to 2 inches of liquid into the soil. Now, some of that will run off, but remember, a lot of the snow came in on soil that hadn't yet had its deep freeze. Remember how mild December was? So the question is, if we actually see a rebound in temperatures, what will it do? Now, that rebound is coming. It's not going to be right away, but it is coming. You got another week of really cold air Midwest before that happens. But I want to show you something. I was in Iowa City last week, so I'm going to go to Iowa City. I just pulled this up on our point forecast system. It's at agweather.com. You can go get it if you want. And what you notice is, yes, today is brutally cold, but there's warming happening late this weekend. I know very cold all week, but look late this weekend. In fact, I'll show it to you this way. What you've got are 3 different models, the European model, the GFS, and the national blend of models. These 2 are from the U.S. This one on top here is from Europe. And you can just kind of follow what the temperatures are doing. And by the time we get out here, about the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, we put a big high-pressure cell in the southeast that returns our winds to be coming out of the south throughout the center part of the country. And the temperatures are not only just going to warm up, but will likely crack freezing, get back above freezing. In fact, the GFS, wants to take it up to 38 degrees by the time we get into next Tuesday. So not this one, but the next one. But very cold until then. Now, how much of that snow melts and sticks around will be critical to assess, okay? From here, I do want to show you one other neat thing. I was recording this about 5 o'clock this morning. The sun was trying to rise up the East Coast, but we can see here just how cold the temperatures were this morning throughout the Canadian Prairie into the central United States. Moderation is going to happen first in the west, but it's been happening on the downwind side of the Great Lakes for this whole time period. We've seen temperatures up to 30 degrees warmer on this side of the Great Lakes versus this. So Wisconsin versus Michigan, major differences. You see, the Great Lakes are largely ice-free still, and as a result, when that cold air blows across that warm water, there's a lot of modification. The first result is the lake effect snow we talked about. The second effect is a change in the temperatures. So it's just neat to see that difference here, and it's what's keeping this whole area more mild than it is on this side. But another brutally cold morning this morning. I did want to show you an animation. This is about to start over here, going back to the 8th of January. We'll watch it for a full week. But as you look at this, we have a series of dots, and you can see what they mean. They're either tying a daily record low or breaking one or breaking a monthly or all-time. And as we get to the 13th, here we go, into the 14th, and now early this morning in the 15th, there's a lot of blue dots showing up on this, representing that brutally cold air that's sneaking into and staying in the United States this week. So our all hazards weather map, let's kind of go west to east. We've seen the National Weather Service offices out in the west increase the area into which they have a winter storm watch. We'll talk about icing threat here in a few moments. You can see it also here in this part of Washington, Idaho, and Montana. Winter storm warning still out for parts of Utah and Colorado. And then this whole area here is our wind chill warning advisory. It's just the cold air. So what it's doing is it's sneaking down like this, but the reason for the winter storm warnings rolling through here is not because there's a well-defined low. It's just the flow above is coming out of the Gulf. It's warm, and it's setting up this sandwiching effect where on the northern side we're getting snow, but right here along the middle we're worried about the risk of some ice accumulation. You can see it better if I actually just show you the wind field. So the frontal boundary has extended pretty far to the south. It's right in through there. Everywhere to the north and west of that line, very, very cold. So you can see which direction the air is coming from here, all right? Now, if I take you up in the atmosphere, let's just go up a mile. There we go. Because of this large area of high pressure, look at where that wind is coming from. It's coming out of the Gulf. It's mild. And this is what's setting up that mid-level, or that low-level, temperature inversion. Cold at the surface, warmer aloft, and that's why we still have the risk of ice. Whoa, gosh, I got to remember this site's so sensitive. But the risk of that ice, we've already seen it here in Texas. It's moving there through Louisiana, Mississippi, getting here almost to the blue, ridge mountains, and then the Cumberland Plateau here. This is the risk area we're going to keep an eye on today. Now, I want to show you the snow side of this too, just from these probability maps. This is where we're expecting through 6 a.m. Central Time on Thursday to grab another 2 inches of snow. And so we'll talk about what's coming here right in through this area and then what we could see up the East Coast. We'll then step this up to 4 inches to really see what the heavy snow amounts are coming into the Cascades, Northern Rockies, the lake effect snow here. I mean, I guess 4 inches isn't heavy if you're in the Cascades, but there's a whole lot more than just that. That's the probability of 8 inches of snow. Let's go ahead and step it up to 12, and now we're really identifying those heavy snow bands here. So we'll be on the lookout for what's getting added to the eastern side of the Great Lakes and what's coming in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, let's get right into the models. This would be the high-res NAM this morning. So overnight we watched the risk of the ice down here and the snow spreading out ahead of it. So a lot of folks down here getting their first taste of snow in a while. And we're going to see that system just continue to play through the early morning hours into early afternoon, spreading its heaviest snows. Look at this, right over the top of Nashville, spreading here toward the Blue Ridge Mountains, up toward Washington, D.C. And that's what that snow looks like, okay? Now, it doesn't really make it over the mountains. And you say, well, why not? Well, we don't have a low. There's no low to curl this up and around. It's overrunning. That's all this is. This is just overrunning warm air aloft, sneaking right over the top of some surface, not just sub-freezing, but very cold air. Isolated showers and storms to the south, but no severe threat. And just watch again the Great Lakes, okay? I'll just go back and forth. Look at those long tendrils of snow coming off the Great Lakes. You can tell the orientation of the wind by just following them. It's really curling around like this. Watch out for some light snow coming out of the Central Plains here later on today, stretching from Colorado over to parts of Missouri and then getting into Illinois as I play this forward in Indiana. So a little bit of light snow into early tomorrow morning. And that system rolls up the East Coast. We'll take a look at those snowfall totals in just a few moments and exits. Now, as it leaves, there's our next main front coming into the Pacific Northwest midday Tuesday. And as it rolls in, there's going to be some shallow cold air here giving us the risk of some ice, but a little bit more mild air with this. So that's why we see a lot of rain into northern California. And the snows don't really build in until you get up here into parts of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. So this is early in the morning on Wednesday, playing through middle of the day Wednesday. And this is going to be the beginning of several days in a row where the western United States gets hit with quite a bit of precipitation. You can see that by just looking over the next 10 days. The flow is starting to zone out. Zone out, that's the wrong term. That's become more zonal, forgive me, across the Pacific Ocean. And we're just going to get several, I wouldn't call them strong systems, but several setups for onshore flow. And that's why we tend to get the wetter conditions there. Now, at the end of this 10-day time period, we're going to watch the Gulf open back up in a major way here. And I'll talk to you more about when this is going to occur. It's around the 22nd, 23rd of this month. I'm looking for some very heavy rainfall. But for the most part, we really need this. The eastern part of the country needs a chance to just dry down after what it's experienced. So I like to see this overall. We have yet to develop a really good setup to deliver like clippers that could roll through the northern plains and Canadian prairie. And we'll have to just watch the jet stream pattern to see what it's capable of as I step you out there in a few moments. Okay, let's compare models. Beginning early this morning, we've already watched what the models suggest through Monday midday, getting into early Tuesday morning. You can see the snow, light snow trying to spread throughout parts of the Northeast. Let's just go back and see it again. Right in there's our heaviest snow bands. Take a look at the snowfall totals in the models in a second. And then that leaves. Then our next system comes into the northwest, presses through the Rocky Mountains, through the Cascades. This is by Wednesday evening, getting into early Thursday morning, and that system's going to roll through. Now, what we're going to be watching is by the time we get into Thursday morning, there will be higher pressure here, and there's also going to be higher pressure here, which means we're going to sandwich in between it right in this area, possibly the chance of picking up some snow. So again, this is Thursday morning, this is Thursday midday, Thursday afternoon and evening. Did you see that kind of, there's a little bit of a chance coming right in through here of getting some snow. You can see it in the models. Okay, but big area of high pressure follows. This is going to bring in another round of brutally cold air late this week. And then you got to watch that high right there. Watch this high. Now, I told you the west gets hit multiple times. Multiple weak systems roll into the west. And keep an eye on this high pressure cell coming over parts of the western Corn Belt, because as we go into Sunday, it sits over Illinois or maybe over Indiana or Ohio. The models are a little bit off. Our next bit of onshore flows in the west, just a continual pattern in the west of bringing in moisture. But what we're going to see is that high pressure cell is going to move east and it's going to move south. So where is it by Monday evening? It's here in the GFS, and to be honest, it's about the same spot in the European. Now, what is the implications of this? Anytime high pressure moves, I don't care what time of year it is, but anytime it moves over the south and east, we open the Gulf. Winds come out of the south. It is mild and it is potentially stormy, not thunderstormy, but just active. Let's just call it that. And we see next Monday night getting into early Tuesday morning that the Gulf is opening in a big way. Now, what we're going to be waiting on is to see if the jet stream can provide some sort of lee cyclogenesis, something coming off the spine of the Rockies to also curl up a low that could go through this area as well. And it's not really well resolved yet, but it's trying to do that between the 22nd and 24th. And that's going to be the really wet go of it there in that week 2 time frame, which I'll show you again in a few moments. Now, I told you I wanted to add up the snow, so let's do it west versus east. We'll look at a couple of models here. This is using a 10-to-1 ratio, so we know some of the issues with that. But as we play through Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday, not a whole lot coming into the west, but you can see the snow where the winter storm warning is out for this part of Colorado, and the lighter snow spreading throughout parts of the plains. Now that's through Tuesday afternoon and evening. The first main front comes on Tuesday night into Wednesday morning into the northwest. That's why we're adding up the snow here. And just playing out there through Thursday, look at the snow spreading into Montana. We desperately need this snow in this area. Again, using a 10-to-1 ratio here. There could be more if the snow ratios are higher. I'm going to take you out one full week. There we go. So we could be picking up another 30, 40, 50 inches of snow at times. I bet you there's a couple spots here that pick up 40 inches of snow in the Sierra Nevada. The Cascades. I was looking at the Sierra Nevada because we're waiting to get our big snows here. But Northern Rockies doing okay. Montana, love every bit of this. We need this snowpack. We need this moisture in this area. Now let's go from here over to the eastern half of the country, and I'm going to take you back to the 0Z run, and let's just add up what we've got. Now this is snow again on a 10-to-1 ratio. We're expecting through Monday into Tuesday. So let's just park it out here at the end of Tuesday and see where that snow is coming through. So we're expecting in here a good maybe 3 to 5 inch peak right into this area, spreading into West Virginia, clipping, the Blue Ridge Mountains here. And then the lake effect really getting going. Light snow coming across parts of the Midwest. Let's add up what happens beyond that. This is getting into the end of this week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There's another chance this weekend. See it adding up here this weekend? That's when that kind of squeezes on. Remember I kind of showed you the squeeze right in this area between the two high pressure cells? Well, adding a bit more snow. So we take it out a week, and we may be looking somewhere in the neighborhood of grabbing another 2 to 4 inches of snow in this area, with heavier amounts kind of lining up with the mountains or at the end of the Great Lakes. I think this is a pretty good overall representation of what we could expect going into this next 7 or 8 days. So we'll watch these totals every day, but this is what we've got. Let's flip it over here, just talk about total precip. So this is just the European model solution on total accumulated precipitation. And if we play it out through Friday into Saturday, I'm just going to take you out 1 week, because I really honestly believe this is a single model. Let's just look at one. We see wetter conditions, snowier conditions in through here, really wet down in parts of Florida, and then it's just the west with its stronger onshore flow all week that adds it up. So parts of the southeast, the southern plains, the upper Midwest, we're just not adding a whole lot into the pattern right now. Now, thinking about that, let's at least look at some probability maps. Who's got the best chance of getting another 3 inches in this pattern? Let's go ahead and step it up to 6 inches. And let's step it up to a foot. Now, when we get up here, we're mainly talking about, the Cascades, Sierra Nevada, Northern Rockies. On the liquid side of this, let's go to probabilities of precip. Let's see who's got a chance at getting an inch. Now, notice, drier, 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 drier. But this area right here, all of this is opening up after the 22nd or on. So this increase in precipitation is becoming more apparent as the big high rolls into the southeast. So wet in Florida, wet in the west, this all comes on late. Now watch what happens. If I go from day 10 and just add in the days following, those probabilities really start to come up as we get out there to the end of week 2. So from day 10 to day 14, that's when we're expecting a major increase in this area. Now, overall, as I look at this, I want to add some context, because we just looked a lot at precipitation totals, and it's good just to put it into the perspective of the last 45 days or so. So this begins on December 1st and goes through January 14th. And what we can tell is mainly due to the recent 3 snow systems that went through here, plus the one that happened around Christmas. It's a big section of the plains that have had a lot of moisture in part of the Midwest. We've begun to fill in this major deficit here, which you saw at the beginning, and the East Coast has been extremely wet, major flooding up the East Coast as snow has melted, in addition to having just heavy rains. Now I'm starting to identify a few areas of concern. Coming off the Rocky Mountains, there's been this area here, and this extends into the Canadian Prairie as well, that has largely missed out on a lot of this. So that's why I'm telling you that snow coming through here is something I really want to see. We can also see down here in parts of Nevada, Southern California, Arizona, and Utah, drier conditions. And even over in sections of western Texas, we've been drier too. So we can't ignore these areas that just keep missing this, because they are honestly just as critical to the overall picture as the places that are getting so much. But as we look out there longer term, this will be the story. We've already seen this play out this winter, so let's just try to learn from it. The jet starts in Sahara, goes across India, across China, hits Japan, goes north of Hawaii, hits Mexico, and then breaks up a little bit over Mexico, but then just continues and runs right over to Europe. That's almost one long, unbroken, 22,000 mile stretch of jet stream level winds that will be set up by a week from now. Now, what I'm interested in is how it evolves, because last time it did this, here's the lesson, it retracted pretty quickly. And that retraction, which we can now see happening a bit here, see how the winds are strong here, but they've kind of backed off in this area? That retraction ended up giving the west wetter conditions first, troughs dipping over the Rockies, can you see it right there? And then southwest flow. And that's why we're thinking about this time period after the 22nd and 23rd as to opening itself back up to a much more active pattern across the U.S. Now look, by the 27th, jet pulls away, the split pulls off the coast, the flow comes back in this direction, and what ends up happening is the week 2 forecasts all look the same. Wetter than average, 22nd to the 28th. In fact, I think the Europeans got the best handle on this once again. So that is through the 28th. You can see widespread wet conditions kind of pulling out of the south. That's an open Gulf. That's a setup for just waiting on a lead trough. And I'll be honest, if that high pressure cell does evolve and stick around, this is the type of thing that can finally push moisture far enough to the north. That will be the transition I'll be watching for, because we've been pretty set watching the weekend trends on this area going wetter. But what about farther to the north? That's an area that I want to see filled in. Okay, let's talk about temperatures before I give you a little bit of new long-range information. The west is going to be showing up mild. Notice how we don't have in California's Central Valley frost risk, but we are expecting sub-freezing temperatures to get down even almost to Orlando, so pretty cold air that's coming in here. Here's this morning's low temperatures. As we go from this morning into Tuesday, that'll be the last warm day here. This is how things look by Wednesday. So much colder air coming in to the southeast by the time we get into Wednesday. Now watch the west. That's Thursday into Friday. Remember, we had those 2 high pressure cells. So there was the one here, and then there's the one that's coming in like that. That's bringing in the next round of cold air Friday into Saturday morning. So look at this. Low temperatures in and around Iowa this upcoming Saturday in the -10 to -17 range. But notice how mild the western United States is. And getting into next week, that will be the end of these repeated shots at colder air. Because you notice that the day 5 through 10 time period, which of course includes 3 more days on the end of the animation I just showed you, shows you that colder air exiting south and east out of the Mid-South, mild air building back in. Some of the big reasons, look how cold it's getting back in Alaska and Greenland. And then with the flooding in of all that mild Pacific air, this is what the new day 10 through 15 looks like. So why? Well, we notice that the high pressures here, it opens this up. Now remember, when I show you this, this is not like, all right, put the winter clothes away and get out the shorts and t-shirts. It's 10 to 15 degrees above average, but it's 10 to 15 degrees above average in late January, which for most of the eastern half of the country is kind of like the coldest time of year. Now, how long does this last? Well, here's the thing I want to tell you about this pattern. There's going to be a lot of us guessing at this, and I really do mean guessing at this. And the reason is this. The MJO, this is the thing that rides over the top of the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. This is really a discussion about where the heat and momentum get transported out of the tropics. It's moving. I mean, it came out in phase 1. It's moved in January to phase 2, 3. It's gotten over into phase 4. It's expected to forecast we move through phase 5, 6, and 7. Is it really going to be our dominant teleconnection? Because what it's going to do is it's going to bring in, maybe a week to 10 days of a certain setup and then a week to 10 days of another. That's what the MJO, when it's open and moving, is going to do. And I'll show you where it is right now. I mentioned this, but let's just put some story to this. We say it's over the maritime continent. Where the heck is that? Well, if the MJO is looking at where the biggest tropical convection is, well, I'll just show it to you. That is right here. So notice over Indonesia, northern Australia, where there's a tropical system right here in northern Australia. This is where the MJO is currently living. And what we typically watch is for an eastward progression of it. So this would be out into phase 6 or phase 7 or phase 8. Phase 8 going that direction. Phase 1 would be a reset back here. So it's not in the Indian Ocean, it's moving out here into Indonesia. So as it makes that progression to the east, what's it mean later? So here it is again. See the blue-green? That's where the rising motion is, right here. And where is that located? Right there. See how it's kind of moving? Now watch. We always just kind of try to encapsulate the blue-green and separate it from the reds. So the MJO is going to move phase 6, 7, 8, 1, come over here almost all the way at the end of the month, beginning of the new month of February, hitting South America. It will then reset. It'll start to show up back here, and these reds will move east with it. And whenever you see this kind of slantwise view of the MJO, it means expect transitional weather patterns. They're going to move. Nothing's stuck. We're not blocked up. I think this is a good overall outlook. I don't see the blocking, at least right now. I don't see it. So again, week to 10 days on, week to 10 days off is the way I would interpret seeing that much motion. Now, the European model has gone back to this for the month of February. It's given us that classic El Nino look for February. It's active subtropical jet, so we wetter across the southern tier of the U.S., maybe high pressure building in at times over parts of British Columbia, which is why we see the risk of drier here and drier there. But if you have to get the flow to go over that high pressure system, what does it do? It comes convergent northwest, and that's why they're shown drier in this area. I'm going to tell you that maybe this is the way the European model's given us a view for February, but I mean, we have to understand it'll come in waves. So let's just take this for what it's worth. I also want to show you what the CPC came up with on Friday. Now, this is their end of January, beginning of February outlook. They continue to keep the west kind of flooded with mild Pacific air, cooler risks east. And if I could make some changes to this, okay, they're really picking up on that El Nino signal there. I would just take more of this area in the green and tell you that probably have better chances of staying wet over a broader area. That would be the slight adjustment that I would make to this. One thing is for sure, El Nino continues to kind of slow down. There are no strong westerly wind bursts right now, which means the winds are kind of racing out of this direction in the trade winds. And you can see by looking at those ocean temperatures that they've likely peaked back there around the beginning of January, and they're slowly starting to fade. But it will be the speed at which it fades, which is most critical. Now, I'm going to show you something. We talked about this a lot last week. The U.S. models, like the CFSV2, are the most aggressive at taking our current El Nino and crashing it through the rest of winter into early spring. In other words, there's a suggestion that by the time we start spring, we will be INSO neutral, and they are just bottoming this out. I mean, this didn't just go La Nina, this went to strong La Nina in the CFSV2. The European model is much slower. It's somewhere in this vicinity. And we oftentimes see the models overshooting on the transition. Now, I'm just going to do a quick review because I'm waiting on some new information, and I'll put together some analog years for you this week about what I think this spring is going to look like. And I'm going to define spring as March, April, and May. So let's bring up what the European model said. With the slower progression on the demise of El Nino, it's got more of El Nino's effects lingering. And we just typically think of El Nino as a moisture provider. It's a flow provider. It's why a lot of the countries looking at March, April, and May it being wetter. Now you're going, wait a minute, doesn't California sometimes rely on a miracle March? It does. And is it a possibility? Yeah, it's still a possibility. Several overriding factors can turn this away from this. We're just broad brush strokes here looking across the country. Now, the National Multi-Model Ensemble has a similar look, but it is more aggressive on developing La Nina, and that's why the concern is beginning to build for much of the western plains that we could see the risk of drought developing early again. Now, I don't want to say that, but I'm just showing you what's in the models, and we need to build in some analog support or find if there's no support in that in the analogs. I'll be doing that this week and next week to try to build this picture for spring for us. But I wanted to do a quick review on those models. So again, this is the National Multi-Model Ensemble, which includes that CFSV2, the one that's crashing El Nino quickly, versus the ECMWF, which is letting it down much more slowly. That will be a mainstay of our longer-term pattern. Okay, to finish this up, I want to show you the last 2 weeks of total precipitation in Brazil. After record dryness across the north for October, November, December, it came in wetter. You can see the rainfall totals here. It was also very wet in Argentina. Southern Brazil went over a little bit drier, so did parts of Uruguay. Now, on satellite, this is just baffling to me. Did that rain really, for these three states, so this is Mato Grosso, Goiás, and Minas Gerais, did it really take the NDVI values and bring them back above the historical average? Now, that's what some late season rain can do, make everything look green and more healthy from space. That's a major question to be answered because we want to know how this is affecting the early planted beans, which we think a lot of them got hit with some major stress from heat and drought, versus the later planted crops, which are maybe now showing up a bit healthier from space. Very important transition. We know that Argentina has been very wet for the last month. You can see here several locations way in the high end of the wet conditions categories here. So they went from major drought to now having much above average precipitation. And there's just questions if there's some local drought damage or is it the same old adage that rain is making grain. We've seen some of the numbers out of Argentina really come up in terms of total production. But the bigger story for me, I think, is being told out pretty well, or spelled out pretty well, in the European weeklies. And so right now, remember, the MJO is putting suppression on the Brazilian monsoon, so it's drier here. We're wetter across southern Brazil, Uruguay, and into Argentina. But as we play this out in a 1-week sliding window, here's the end of the month heavy rainfall that's expected to come back as the MJO returns to this area. Now, by the end of this month, they're expecting to really ramp up harvest. And if it's wet there, we talked about this all last week, I'm concerned what that could mean going forward. The models want to keep things wetter there going in through February. And any wet conditions here that could slow down harvest is important to pay attention to. But then we want to know, if that safrinha crop goes in and there's decent early moisture, could that actually mean that the crop gets off to a good start, the safrinha crop, late in February because of the moisture that was provided in February? That's an unknown as well. I am still concerned that the monsoon slows down early in April. And I'm going to stop it there this morning, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. I'll be actually out in Phoenix, so I will be dodging all the really, really cold conditions where I normally live here in the Midwest and heading out there for a few days for a conference. So I'll talk to you from Phoenix in the morning. Thanks.